Hey everyone, this is Dan Keldsen with Insights for Pros, where I interview people who are both Plexicam clients and who are experts in various fields that I think that you should know about. They have deeper skills than the average bear that I've found, and I want to pull that information out of them so that you and I can take advantage of that. Today's guest is Robbie Samuels, somebody that I've known for several years now. He's a friend and a colleague who knows a metric ton about building better events that are much more engaging in Zoom. Definitely not the snooze on Zoom kind of experience. He's been recognized as a networking expert by NPR, PCMA, and Harvard Business Review, among others. Today, we will be talking about his latest book, Out of Boredom. And as you'll find out, we went very deep in a whole bunch of topics that I think that you could really benefit from learning from. As it turns out, both as somebody who might be leading a Zoom event, participating as a panelist or some other kind of speaker, or just as a guest, a participant with other participants in an event. There's something there for everybody, so let's go. Robbie, it has been, 2 years since we met in person for the first time and had lunch, and then you ran away.
I did. I moved out of state as soon as we had lunch.
I have that effect on people, apparently.
Yeah, so 18 or so months ago, I moved to the Philly suburbs after being in the Boston area for 20 years.
Wow. No, I didn't realize it had been that long. Well, that's, and for reasons I don't understand. So we had that lunch, and we actually haven't been on camera together either in that time, which seems somehow impossible given what we both do for a living. So, so you've been really busy. You've done 2 books now during COVID / whatever we're in now.
That's true.
So congratulations on making all that happen. I know it's a ton of work. Can be lonely, but also exciting.
Thank you.
So your latest book is called Out of Boredom, Low-Tech Solutions for Highly Engaging Zoom Events. And yeah, and it just came today. So that's great.
I just got the proof. It was very exciting. Exciting. It's a real book. And my first 2 books are great. They're like really quick content books. But this one's got like more than twice the content of his other books. It's like 3 times content. Because there's just more to say. I mean, I wrote 10,000 words just on breakout rooms. It was the first chapter I really started writing because I feel like there's so much we can do to really transform how we use that particular resource, that feature, and ended up becoming like a major part of the whole book because I had a lot to say.
One of the things that really caught me about the book was you and because I've sat in at least one of your Friday sessions that famously kicked off your whole spiel on Zoom. I don't know anybody that knows more about breakout rooms. There maybe isn't somebody that knows more about breakout rooms than you do. I mean, I know a lot of people that are in the business of, presenting and doing workshops and coaching and writing books and all sorts of stuff. But most breakout room experiences suck. They're just terrible.
People blame the medium, right? Yeah. They blame Zoom or they blame Teams or whatever the platform is. But it's not about these virtual platforms. It's actually about how we use them. And a lot of what I wrote about in the book actually applies to it applies to any virtual platform. Right. I'm giving the step-by-steps for Zoom, but purpose-first design and online facilitation techniques apply to any virtual platform, but also transfer over to in-person. We can apply a lot of these same thought concepts to the in-person sort of world.
Yeah. So before we dive into the book too much, one thing I wanted to start off with, because this came up with, I don't know if you know him, Rich Mulholland. He's out of South Africa. He's written a bunch of books, really, really great presenter. Yeah, we have a shared love of rock and roll and metal music from different aspects of our lives, so I really enjoyed talking to him. He specifically recently on LinkedIn posted that pre-COVID, like everybody, he presented in person on a stage in front of a big crowd, and that he loves it. And then we got all locked down, and I know a lot of professional speakers that a surprising number that said, you know what, I'm going to wait this out. I'm not going to bother presenting. I'm not going to do virtual. That's not my space. One thing he posted recently was, now that he's had so much experience doing virtual, he's gone back to flying around, the world, and which he loves to do. And he's purposely changed the way that he presents on stage now based on everything, or a lot of things that he learned from going virtual. Since you have a professional speaking background as well, presumably pre-COVID, most of that or all of it was in person, or what was the sort of mix there? Was it all?
I pre-COVID, I spent 10, 11 years speaking before COVID hit.
Okay.
I did a handful of webinars, and I specifically mean where you can't see participants webinars.
Yep.
And I didn't like it. Like, I remember doing one webinar where I wasn't even on camera. They were like, "Oh no, you're not even going to be on camera," and I was just this like talking head or talking voice, so like you couldn't even see me. It's just so very disconnected and strange to not be able to interact with the audience, particularly because I used to do these 90-minute to 2-hour very interactive programs that weren't really workshops, but they weren't really lectures. They were kind of performative.
Okay.
They were about networking, and I think that I feel like there's been a significant influence in both directions, because the work that I did before the pandemic in person wasn't just stand behind a lectern speaking for a big stage where what people are watching you on the iMag screens. My stuff was more like a few hundred people in a room and sitting at tables, and it was my job to keep them awake. I was often booked 2 to 4 p.m. or 3 to 5 p.m. after lunch, leading into some kind of networking or reception. And I joked that I was training to be a dad for years because I was working on my bad dad jokes for a really long time, and then I had one kid and then a second, so now I'm double certified. So a lot of what I would do is I would call on people. I would acknowledge people's, like, I wouldn't call them to like answer something, but I would say things in person like, "Mary's got it." Like, I'd walk around ahead of time and meet as many people as I could, and I would just sort of memorize a handful of people who seemed like high energy. And then I would look to see how they responded in person, and I would be like, "Oh, Mary totally agrees." And she'd be like nodding along. Well, when Mary nods along, and now everyone else feels like they're going to nod along with Mary.
Yeah, exactly.
And if someone was falling asleep in the back of the room, I would call over to the person next to them and have that person say something. And that would usually wake up the person who's asleep.
Right.
So I think similarly, my job when I was speaking virtually has been to just keep the whole room engaged. And so some of the things that I do is if I have if I have more than 20 people, I do try to have a chat moderator at least. I'm comfortable handling the tech mostly, but it is nice to have someone else moderating chat. But I have them copy the question and the person's name into a separate doc, usually a Google Doc. And I do that because when I do answer questions, I want to be able to say that person's name.
Sure.
I also have a setting on my Zoom so that the people's names are always visible. And that's a setting you have to turn on. And that really helps because I don't have to put my cursor over people's videos to see what their name is. So when someone is nodding or laughing or whatever it is, I can respond to that. And I just did a presentation for my launch team the other day. We had 107 people come. I was so close to increasing the capacity. It got to 99. And then it went back to 98, and I didn't. I was ready to upgrade. But in your slides, you can still, at a minimum, you're going to see 6 yourself and 5 other people. And so you can actually expand it up to 24. But I just positioned one of my friends like right underneath the camera, and she was like giving such good body language. And at one point, I called her out for it. I was like, "Oh, and Denise," and she just was like, like.
Right.
So I think there's this piece where you break the fourth wall, whether it's in person, whether you're doing it virtually. You call out people both in the moment, and even if I'm doing a webinar and I can't see people, I now will flip to see the attendee list and just randomly call out people's names as I'm going. I think the thing that I get away from and I don't do in virtually is I don't do a roll call. I think it's such a tired habit that you get on a meeting and you're like, "Everyone, let us know in chat where you're calling in from." And it's like, and then you have to listen to this person do this, like, "Oh, I see this so-and-so from here and so-and-so from there." And yes, you basically confirmed that everyone knows where the chat is, but that feels performative and like you have to go through these steps.
Right.
What I will do is like interesting debriefs in chat after breakout rooms or as part of a discussion, or I'll ask people to write their favorite pump-up song, and then I'll make a playlist of their pump-up songs to like play snippets. So like it has a meaning. Like I'm not just doing it to do it as a check mark.
There's certainly a lot of people that dread Zoom, period. Or at this point, they're kind of burn out. A lot of it going to the point of, boredom is part of your subtitle. You can do bad Zoom. Everybody can do really bad Zoom. That's not the issue. It's how do you do it well, and in a thoughtful way. And you talk about with purposeful design. Is that the phrase that you use?
Purpose first.
Okay.
What I believe is that we're not trying to replicate what we did in person.
Right.
We're trying to reimagine it using all the tools available to us. Some of the stuff I do actually pulls in analog tools like paper and pen. Imagine that. Or or having people write their comment in chat, but not hit enter until I tell them to. What I like about that is it's a bit of an analog kind of moment in a digital space, meaning you don't have to have your brain reading what everyone else is posting while you're trying to carefully write your thoughtful comment. So we just pause the flow of information, and then everyone hits enter when I tell them to, and you have I call it the waterfall debrief, because you have this like flood of responses.
Right.
And then now, because there's this new way of using the chat experience allows for like the chat to be in threads. So I can say like one of the things I've asked in get to know you breakout rooms would be, if you had free time, what would you want to learn? And then when they get back, I have them write their answer in chat without hitting enter. And then when they do hit enter, I say, take 2 minutes and scroll up and down. And if you see something that you want to respond to, you can just like respond right to that person. And so I'll go through and call out a few people, might ask a few questions as that's happening. But people are connecting around things. So I know there are people who have met up to practice conversational Italian. People have shared, here's my favorite YouTube for learning guitar, like whatever it is. And it's so cool. And I don't know how you would do that in person. Like that would be really hard to pull off in person. Yeah. Yep. So I think that there's some really phenomenal ways we can use these tools. And I think when you go back to in person, it's like, okay, we have to do it a little differently. For me, in person, it's all about how do you welcome people into the room? How do you grab people's attention, which is similar to online. You got to have some kind of like knowledge gap or something that kind of pulls them in. A knowledge gap being something unexpected, memorable, distinct that like makes their brains engage and lean forward. But yeah, I really, for in person, for me, it's a lot about interrupting that quiet time. The first few people who come into a session when there's like concurrent rooms, they set the tone to be super quiet. If you and I are coming out from the hallway, we're having a great conversation, we enter this room, wall of silence. So we have greeters. So every one of the events I run, there'll be greeters at the door. It gives people explicit permission to connect, and they're there to find each other. They left their house to get not just information, but build connections. This is my premise pre-pandemic, was that events are about content and connection, but people's intentions around going to events and networking is really high. Their follow through on those intentions is really low. Right. And when it comes to virtual can't be an exception. Like virtual events have to also be about content and connection, which is why my book is all about creating engagement and inclusion and help people feel not just invited, but welcomed.
Yeah. If you see like really big events, like I have not been to a Tony Robbins show and I'm not going to spend $5,000 to do that. Have you seen his like little virtual setup where it's like a wraparound bazillion screens? It's wild.
I joke that to do hybrid really well, as in simultaneous virtual and in-person audience, my push is to use virtual to enhance the experience, whether it's replacing an in-person or it's leading up to or after an in-person. I think it's a great way to keep members engaged. It's one thing to go to a manual conference once because it was sort of in your region. The second time you go, it's a bigger expense, a bigger travel, and you still don't know anyone. But what if that year in between, you went to a bunch of programs where you actually got to go into breakout rooms and meet some people, and now you have people to look forward to reconnecting with the next year? It's just going to increase the possibility of you going back year 2, year 3, and by then, you really do find your friends, and I think you start to make an effort to come by year 5. It's a reunion every time you show up. But I feel like the virtual can really bridge the in-person annual event experience, and something that you don't have to do it monthly even. Like you could do this quarterly a few times throughout the year between, and it would still, I think it would enhance the retention of your membership.
Sure.
While
Yeah.
providing great value, and provide value for members who can't make it to the in-person for any number of reasons, including the fact that it's a global community.
Right.
And not everyone wants to fly to wherever it is you decide. And in-person has restrictions. Similarly, Zoom has some restrictions. We just got to learn the rules of the game and play it as well as we can, because we don't want to spend a week and a half in one location to learn. We want to get it all done in one. But we don't have to anymore. We could do some stuff in person and then have content that comes before and after in a virtual format. And then we don't have to have 42 things happening all at once. Purpose First Design, just to explain it, Dan,
Sure.
when people come into your event, in person, virtual, they are thinking, feeling, and or doing one thing. And at the end of your time together, you want them to be thinking, feeling, and or doing another thing. And that in between is the transformation. It really dictates everything. What are those objectives? I think one thing that's changed for me is that I was not as thoughtful in person pre-pandemic about getting clear on that. And now all I do is work with people. I do all these the smallest way to work with me is to book an hour-long speaker strategy session. And I feel like because virtual is a little harder to know whether we're hitting our spots, we work harder at it. And I feel like taking that to in person has really been helpful.
Yeah, I think so. On the virtual side, I think it's been like a lot of things virtual. You can experiment more, right? Because you don't have to take a week off to go fly to Vegas or whatever, whatever the scenario happens to be. It really can be a very productive environment for you to like really rapidly improve as a presenter or facilitator or whatever it is that your role happens to be. That we should take advantage of instead of just suffering through yet another terrible Zoom.
I have a friend, Dorothy Wilhelm, who went through my 5% Advantage program, which is a program I kicked off in April 2020. It's to help you get more confident and competent using Zoom. And there's a certification option. And she became a certified virtual event professional at the age of 86. She's now 89.
Yes, I saw your note there. Yeah.
And she's still hosting. She hosts a weekly event, a monthly event. She's getting paid to speak professionally for 40 years. She's still getting paid top dollar for her talk. She's doing it from home. It's great because travel is really hard on her right now. It's hard on all of us right now.
Sure.
And to me, that is the beauty of virtual, is that she's bringing together disparate geography, like people from all walks of life that she's had into events that she's doing. And that's the thing we can offer people. I think it's about accessibility. A piece of my book is about how to create more accessible presentations, but I also think the medium itself is a lot easier for a lot of people to join.
That's the kind of thing that we talked about in my book that we published in 2014, the Gen Z effect, which was like, how do we get multiple generations to work together and not just point fingers at each other that they're the devil?
I agree with you. I just think like there's so much possibility, but we have to move away from 45 minutes of death by PowerPoint followed by ineffectual Q&A, no one moderating chat. That is so 2019.
Yes.
Don't do what we've always done, like work to improve.
Right.
I mean, I have a whole section in my book explaining the difference between webinar and Zoom meeting, and then say, like, if you're not actually using a webinar, stop calling it a webinar. So I think we have to communicate our expectations the same way we might communicate dress code or the attire for an event.
Sure.
To come, camera ready in a space quiet enough to be able to unmute. We're going to be in small group discussions. Let that be a thing. And if you haven't been doing that, you have to now like reset the expectations and the culture and the norms.
Well, so we have run out the time. This happens a lot when I'm talking to friends. So there's a ton that's in your book that obviously we didn't get a chance to talk about. I think I think we had a good supplementation of what you have in the book. But the extreme detail that you go into on breakout rooms and how and why to use them. I've been in a lot of awkward, silent, boring breakout rooms that usually make me want to just hang up and go do something else. People who are scared of breakout rooms, being in them or running them, certainly you should definitely focus on that chapter from Robbie's book. Was there anything you wanted to wrap up on before we call this a day?
Yeah, so Break Out of Boredom, Low-Tech Solutions for Highly Engaging Zoom Events is available at breakoutofboredom.com, which is where you can get paperback or the ebook is available for just $2.99 for part of March 2023. And there's also bonus content that you can access whether or not you buy the book just by going to breakoutofboredom.com. I've downloaded and created cheat sheets around checklists, step-by-step guides. There's 30 plus videos available to you. Whatever you might need to kind of really up your game. I'm a fan of the concept of Kaizen, which I didn't know the term. I was talking about getting 5% better. And this is a very, old term.
67 years old, yeah.
Yeah, it's like, and I was like, that's it. So, I think that if we can all aim, whatever we're doing, whether we're participating, hosting, facilitating, speaking, if we can aim to get 5%, 10% better every time we are on a virtual platform, I think we're all collectively going to elevate what this can be. I want to switch the thinking from Zoom fatigue to Zoom intrigue. And we have to do that collectively. That is not something I can do. So part of the reason for writing the book was to give more people the tools to go play, experience the possibilities. And I think we're going to create some really interesting outcomes.
Yeah.
Very
awesome.
cool.
Cool, man.
Thank you so much for your support, Dan.
Yeah. And it was great to catch up with you. Let me know if there's anything else that I can do.
Cheers.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, Robbie.
Bye-bye.